Hey there, readers and storytellers, and thank you for joining me on Story Unfolding, a show about changing the world through creativity, ingenuity, and intellectual discourse. We share meaningful conversations with creators, creatives, and dreamers who take it upon themselves to make a difference in the world. We have an influence on the world around us, regardless of our intent. The only way forward is by confronting the hard truths, asking the tough questions, and letting your voice be heard. We are better together each day with our human story unfolding. Now, I am pleased to have Alexis Anicque on with me today. Alexis Anicque is an experienced author and avid adventurer, driven by a love for travel and exploration. As a mother of two grown children and nana of four, her family is her pride and joy. In her free time, she enjoys riding and sailing. Welcome, Alexis. Thank you for joining us. I'm so pleased to have you, and I
Thank
can't
you
wait to
so
have
much
this
for having
conversation.
me.
Yeah, would you like to jump in and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, right now I'm kind of in limbo. We're in Texas because my husband's family, of course, is here, and he's an only child. They're getting up there in age. We had to kind of put our run amok on hold. But generally, I'm a traveler. I like to write about my travels. I also like to embellish on them. So I write fiction and nonfiction. So I like to tell my story, but I also like to tell the stories that I make up. And yeah, I think I have fire under my feet. Anywhere I go, I want to be there like a month, and then I'm like, oh, you know what? I've been here long enough. So
Yeah.
it's time to move on.
That's fantastic. Yeah, so I can, if you're looking at this on YouTube right now, you see that Jump Before You Fall. That's Alexis's short story compilation of her travels. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, Alexis?
Jump Before You Fall is actually a super motivational, real true story about me and my husband moving on to a sailboat. So it's the first in a series. The next one comes out in the fall. It talks about minimalism, motivation, and it talks very much about how I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I have a bug that's flying near me. It's driving me a little mad. You can cut that out too if you want. I
That's
wanted to be
okay. That's
outside.
okay.
It's such a beautiful day and I love being outdoors. So I thought, this would be better than being inside my little travel trailer. But
Hey, it fits
okay,
you. It fits you, right? That's what we're here for.
exactly. So it was a wasp, so it scared me to anyway. So the thing about it is that I really want to impress upon in this book is not only am I grateful that I did it at such a young age. I mean, I now am in my 50s and we were planning to do it at the age of 50, but we actually bought our first boat at 38 and moved on like 3 weeks later.
Oh, wow.
And the reason why we did that was because we could, you know, and it's like we both, we're like, well, we want to keep eating, but our friend that we were talking to, he's like, but you could do it if you really wanted to. And we're like, yeah, well, of course we can buy a boat. We bought a very inexpensive one and we had to do the work to it, but yeah. And he was like, well, then you should do it because you get up in there your 60s and 70s and suddenly you have family issues, mortgages, or you have other things that take place in your life. And now you're not able to make that jump. And that's why I call it jump before you fall because, you're always told, look before you leap. But guess what? You may never leap. And if we had waited, we never would have done it because my husband got cancer in his 40s and we ended up having to sell our boat after only 7 years. But thank God we had 7 years, right?
Yeah.
And I did learn some very serious life lessons in moving onto a sailboat. Number one, whatever you have that you can't walk away from owns you. Okay, people never understand it when I say that, but like grandma's teacups or all these souvenirs or all these things that you've collected or have been given through family members, all this stuff, and you like, oh, I absolutely have to hold on to it. It owns you. You do not own it. It's very important for people to understand the difference of what you own and what owns you. Because I tell you right now, I could literally pack a duffel bag or a backpack and walk out that door and know I'd be fine. I've sold off everything I owned multiple times, lived out of a backpack for 3 years, and you know what? I don't miss any of it. I don't miss one thing. not one thing. You know why? Because I have so many life experiences that are way better memories than that teacup or that souvenir or whatever. I gave all the family mementos back to the family. I said, you know, it's your choice what you do with them. I don't want them and I don't need them because I remember the human that was behind it. So that was one of the biggest lessons I think I learned was stuff is just stuff. It's just stuff, you
Now
know.
I'm
Um,
curious, how did you, I don't want to cut you off, but that hits home personally with the personal mementos. How did you deal with that? How did you traverse that? Was it a difficult, thing to give those
no,
back to your family? Like tell them you didn't want these things?
I just, you know what? I just put them in a box and shipped them. And I said, hey, you got a package coming, and this is the reason why. I did get a lot of pushback from it, and I had some serious family issues for a long time over it. But, you know, you have to choose your own destiny. You really have to choose your own destiny. And for me, it was like, okay, I wanted to travel 20 countries. I wanted to live on a sailboat. Okay, how realistic is it for me to have those things? You know, I have probably 20 SD cards because I'm addicted to taking pictures, right? Every single photo I've ever taken in my entire life has been put on SD cards or flash drives or and a hard drive backup. The reason for that is because I gave my kids the photo albums. I mean, my son was 18 when we bought our first boat, and I packed up every photo album. I packed up his baby blanket, all of his baby stuff, and I said, son, you have your own place now. This is yours. It's your decision what you do with it. I did the same thing with my daughter. I gave them every single thing, but I have all those pictures. And let me be honest, I look at them a lot more now. Like when I'm writing a book, especially about me, or I'm writing a book, or I'm writing blogs, and I talk about my family, and I'm looking for a specific picture, I end up in this whirlwind. My husband, he laughs at me so hard because I'll like click on one and I'll be like, oh, these are the kids. This I renamed it, you know, something different. Next thing you know, I'm 7 hours into looking at family photos, you know. And so
Wow.
I look at those pictures a lot more on my computer than I ever did when they were in a box in an album.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, they actually mean more to me now. I
Do you have
think
them like meticulously organized and labeled and everything?
I actually do have I do and you know what's funny is I have them by year. So I have every year and then in that year there's a subcategory of if it's just Michael or if it's just Kayla or you know so I have it kind of very categorized out but they are by year so that I actually now I had to do that. I had to do that because I was like looking at files and be like, "Oh, the time Kayla visited me on the boat." Be like, oh my gosh, she visited me so many times. And then I look on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's this year. That's not the year. So I ended up having to go through and rename them all. When we first moved onto the boat, I sold off everything. I mean, everything that we had, I sold it all off, with the exception of a few items here and there. Enough, my literally, it all fit in the back of a pickup. Everything we took. And we
Mhm.
took that down to Corpus Christi. We were living up near Dallas and we put in a storage unit there because we were going to buy this boat. It ended up being in North Carolina. All this is in my book, but it ended up being in North Carolina. So we were going to bring it back to Texas. You know, that's where we were going to do the solar panels and the electronics and all this work on this. So we took all the stuff down to Corpus Christi and we left our vehicle and flew off. We left it at his dad's house and you know, so we get up to North Carolina and we make all this. About a year later, we still weren't in Texas. We were at this point going down the coast, just having a good time. We ended up leaving the boat in Merritt Island, Florida, and we flew back to Texas. And we took all that stuff and put it in the truck and drove it across the states. And on the way there, I was like, do you know that we have paid more in the last year to store this? Because it was a small storage unit, like $50 a month, $40 a month, but it was a whole year. I was like, you know, we paid more than any of this stuff is worth. Like it was all photo albums and statements, bank statement, all that stuff that you really think you need that you could actually put digital, you know. And I was just like, we're not doing this again. we're not doing another storage unit. And so by the time we got back to the marina, I literally had this the berth, the front berth, I had it completely stacked with all this stuff. Like our whole half of our boat was all just junk from the storage unit. And I went one box by one box, photo album by photo album, tirelessly. Because I was like, that's it. We are going to be free. We're going to be free of all this stuff. It's not going to happen. And I actually did. We got rid of it all. We didn't have a storage unit, and it was pretty enlightening. It was pretty enlightening. What you find is valuable. You'd be amazed. A lot of people are surprised when you go through all of your stuff and you come to the realization that, you know what, this stuff, it seems so important at the time.
Yeah.
Since then I've been to 20 plus countries. After we sold the boat, my husband got well. We ended up having to sell the boat, of course, and we were on the next journey, and that next journey ended up being us, going and volunteering through 20 countries. And during that journey is when I started to really think, you know what, I need to write some good stories, and I started with murder mystery I'd written 20 years earlier. I had
Oh,
written this
okay.
20 years earlier. Yeah. And I had sent out a ton of query letters, tons of queries. This was the early 90s. I had sent out a ton of query letters. Not one person even responded. I think I sent out like 150. I didn't even get a no. I
Oh
mean,
my
how
God.
rude is that? Not even a no. And so, ironically, though, I did it on a typewriter. I just want you to know that's how old
Oh
this
my
story was.
goodness.
I did it on a
Wow.
typewriter. So I printed it out, and my daughter ended up putting it onto a flash drive for me years earlier. And ironically, I'm sitting in a marina because we're on a friend's boat, and I had gotten this book from the marina. That every marina has a little library. I'd gotten this book from this library, and I read through it, and I don't remember. It might have been a kind of romance, but mystery, whatever. I read it and was like, the ending was horrible, and I'm grateful I can't remember the name because I would spill the beans. But the ending was horrible. The book was terrible. Anyway, it was a terrible book, and I was like, man, that book I wrote like 20 years ago was way better than this. And so I asked my husband, I said, well, how long are we going to be here? I mean, I know you're helping him work on his engine. How long do you think we're going to be here? He's like, a month. He's like, I got to go see our son. He's like 2 hours away. I got to go see our son. I think he still has that book I wrote. And he's like, are you thinking? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to self-publish it. and, and he was like, pretty bold. So I did. I went to my son's house. I got my old briefcase back and I took it up, and I spent tireless hours. I had to revamp it because when I wrote it, this was 93,
Yeah.
right? 93 when I wrote it, because it was right before my husband and I got married. And nothing was the same. Like computers, all that stuff really didn't exist. So for me, when I wrote it, I was forward thinking.
Yeah. Oh my
Because
goodness.
I had some computer stuff in there from what I'd seen on TV, and I was like, I was forward thinking then, and now it's like dark age. So I rewrote that, and then I just got this crazy idea that I had to write this book about a mom and daughter. Being the fact that I'm not real super close to my mother, but I'm insanely close with my mother-in-law. And I wanted this like book that had this incredible mother-daughter connection. And here I start writing this book, and this is Finding Famous. And I'm writing, and I'm about, I don't know, a couple chapters into it, and I got bored. Like really bored. I was like, okay, something has to happen here. And that's when I created the monster in the forest. And I started creating these different characters. And I was like, oh, that hotel I was in Liverpool, they had a ghost. You know what? I'll have a ghost in here. But I wanted it to be still a connection with the mother and daughter. So it's a very strong mother-daughter connection book, but it is magical realism. And my whole fantasy series, it is magical realism because I still wanted it to be very real world. I don't want to create a different world. I live in this world. Okay. So for me, I am very, very much, and that's the fourth one in that series, comes out August 9th in just
Now,
a
what
few
is
days.
that series called?
It's the famous adventure series.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it has right now it has two novels and it'll have two short stories. There is talks about us taking the two novels and breaking them down to three books each and creating a 10-book series so they can all be in hardback and look beautiful and everything else. So I haven't decided if I'm going to prove that or not yet. We'll see. It sounds like so much work. But
Hey, if you can organize all those photos, I'm sure you could do that.
true. That's true. But it does, I sell books in grocery stores right now.
Mhm.
And about twice a week, I go and sit for 4 hours in a grocery store. And if you ever go into a store, you see an author, please just go up and talk to them because they are bored. I'm just going to let you know. They are bored. But I sell a few books a week in grocery stores, and mostly it's just to get my name out there and kind of meet people because I live a pretty quiet existence by myself a lot while my husband's working.
Mhm.
Um, and so most of the time we work together, but this place didn't actually need my assistance. Usually we work together wherever we land for 6 months to a year. We bank up, sell off everything we own, and go like months, maybe a year at a time. Um, and so it's a pretty cool existence. I mean, we're going to have to sit still for a bit because of my husband's parents, but I'm sure in the inevitable will be happening again and off we'll go again.
That's amazing. So when you first embarked on your journey, you said your kids were already grown, right? So it was just you and your
Yes.
husband? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then so I want to kind of bridge the between your, nonfiction stories that you're writing and Jump Before You Fall, and then your fantasy series. So you talked about travel really kind of inspiring you to write, and I'm curious about like what kind of stories did you find along the way that really, inspired you and pushed you into, this to take this jump, to go into self-publishing and
Well, you know what? I think it was after I got my book back from my son, and here I'm still traveling, and I have a month to kill. When my husband's helping a friend of his on his boat, I have a month to kill, and I'm like, I've got to do something in this month, so I'm gonna write these books, and I wanted to start with one I already had written. I thought that would be the easiest way, but then when I went to write the second book, I didn't. I wasn't the same human I was 20 years ago. So like I didn't have that same kind of passion about that type of story. I wanted to write something where I'm showing this strong mother-daughter connection, but I also wanted her to see the world because and I'm so close to this girl, even though she's in my mind. I'm so close to her. Her name is Famous, and she's me like afterwards, after I realized that I don't need all this stuff, and after I realized that there's so much more to life that we can have now. I mean, people they'll say, I don't have the money. Well, do you know what? I didn't have the money either. When we moved on the boat, I ended up sewing. We were in the Virgin Islands. My husband had gotten solar panels. I ended up sewing half the time in the cockpit in the middle of the bay. That's how I earned enough money for phone, food, and fuel. You know, I mean, so people just use excuses for why they don't live their dreams. With Famous, I wanted her to travel. She had been working in a library her whole life. She had a mom that was like she needed to be a stable environment for her, but she wanted her to travel too. She wanted her to see the journey to where her mom found her because her mom didn't have her. Her mom found her. And so her mom had kept this amazing journal, which turns out to be a magic journal. In the fourth book, it's called Before Finding Famous, the Magic Journal. So she got her mom's journal and followed her mom's exact path to where her mom found her. And it's a fun story, and a lot of all the places except for one in the book I've been to. And like in Liverpool, there is a hotel there that's haunted. I'm not sure if I should say the name of it or not. I don't know the logistics of that. I mean, it's on Google. I mean, it's not like you can't find it, but there is a haunted hotel in Liverpool. There's some activity up in the mountains in Canada. Um, in Ireland, a lot of the witch trials and stuff that I talk about, those are things that I actually researched when I was in Dublin. And so, I mean, it is, yes, it is a fantasy magical realism book, but it's also got a lot of things that I heard in the places where I talked about them.
So that's awesome. I think we talked about this in a pre-interview that in my story, my dystopian sci-fi, I also talk about places I've been to. I think two of the locations in the whole book are places that I haven't been to. Everywhere else is drawn directly from my experience. I'm curious in terms of because mine is a lot more, at least from my perspective. I haven't read your famous series yet, but I've read enough fantasy that at least the initial perspective that I have is mine is more erring on the realism side than a fantasy would be. And I struggled when I was trying to create the additional, kind of not fantastical so much, but fictional aspects of my story because I was so set on trying to keep it as real and accurate as possible. Like, how did you traverse that? Like, how difficult was that for you? And what did you do to kind of find a balance between, the drawing in your real world experiences, but then adding that fantastical aspect?
I really struggled with it. I still struggle with it now. When I wrote this last one, as I said, it comes out August 9th. I did struggle, and I ended up taking her places where I was familiar. I mean, places I'd been, because to me, and experiences, like I put her on a ferry, because gave her experiences that I experienced. I do. That's why I said, like, I could never have written Harry Potter. I could never. I mean, I don't know how somebody, even now when I watch TVs or I read books or any of that kind of stuff, watch movies, I'm like, I don't know if you do this too. I'm like, sit back and I'm like, man, whoever wrote this just blows my mind. Just
I
blows
do that
my
every
husband's
time.
like, my husband says, you can't turn it off. You just can't. He's like, you can't just look at it for being a movie. I'm like, no, I have to think, how did they come up with this? I mean, how did they like, I can't create a whole nother world in my mind. Are you crazy? I mean, so yeah, I do struggle with that. And I even struggle with my book being called fantasy. I mean, even though it does have, in the second book, Famous Destiny, there is a little bit of a fantasy vibe towards the middle to the end, in my mind, but it's still magical realism. To me, I always thought fantasy was like Chronicles of Narnia, or something like that, where you're creating this amazing world and all this stuff, and you've got these mystical creatures, and whereas mine, it's kind of like it's this world, just fantasy things happen in it. So, I don't know. I guess I don't know how hard it is for you, but for me, I'm still always trying to search for that answer of how could I do this or how could I do that.
Yeah.
It is a struggle, and that's I've started really, really focusing on my nonfiction. Um, Mainly because, it's my story and I know it, so it's easier, but sometimes you're a little bit standoffish to tell your story. I mean, some things you leave out because you just don't think people need to know, you
Yeah.
know? So,
Well, I see a lot of parallels in terms of your real life experiences and then becoming an author as well. Like, do you see? I'm curious if you didn't do this jump to the sailboat life and the minimalism and all that, do you think you would have become an author as well?
no, no, I don't. I was living that same existence everybody else lives. We were going to work every day. Every day we were going to work. The only thing crazy, we were living up near Dallas. We were in Garland, Texas, and we raced sailboats for 6 years in Rockwall, Texas. And so in Rockwall, they have what's called Dallas Race Week once a year, but the rest of the year on Wednesdays, you can go to any one of the marinas and they have races most of the year except the coldest months. And I wanted to learn to sail. Well, my husband and I both. We talked for years, he had sailed before. We talked for years, we're going to live on a boat and sail around the world. That was our big thing, from the time the children were little, we had the kids really young. So we were like, we'll have plenty of time, and then we started doing the research. It was like, gonna have to be a sailboat. There's no way we could afford fuel. I mean, gonna have to be a sailboat. So we ended up doing this, getting the sailboat because of a friend during that Dallas race week. And, we raced for 6 years, but before that, we were living that normal life. We were living, I think at the time we were in a condo. I think we'd already left the house. We were selling off our properties. We were, trying to make some decisions, but before that, we were just that normal Monday through Friday. I mean, even when the kids were growing up, we did massive amount of camping and fishing. We were up in Washington for several years. It was beautiful up there. And but we were always like that leave it to beaver type lifestyle. You work, you come home, you take care of your yard, you do some family events. Every Sunday we played games with the kids, now every Sunday I play games with my in-laws. So, I mean, but very normal structure. There was no plans on it. I didn't ever plan on going back to writing. It never even dawned on me until I'm sitting on a boat in Florida. I got to kill a month. I had already written a book. I read this horrible book and think, you know what? I could do better. I could do better. I used to write all the time. And that was it. I mean, I had written, I don't know how many times I had done like essay contests growing up. I actually got some poetry published when I was in my 20s. So I'd already done some things, but to as far as a novel, nope, didn't even cross my mind. Nope. Not at that time. So, I mean, I think everything just kind of happens. It
Yeah.
just that at least in my life, everything just kind of happens.
That's amazing. I love how you just kind of embrace life and you just kind of go with the flow. I think that's awesome. That's a really good way of, kind of just existing, like you said. I know my family, my wife and I are in the process of we're planning to go fully nomadic. I think we've talked about this before,
Yeah.
we we need to, talk offline definitely to get more insight from you and your husband as experts in this field.
I
Um,
think we're in the same state. Maybe we can have lunch someday.
that would be fantastic. Now, before I close this out, I do want to ask because you've had such a wealth of experience throughout your life in everything that you've done. What would you say would be like your? It's going to be hard to quantify it, but what would be your biggest lesson that you've learned while traveling, being an author, doing the sailboat, everything? Like, what would be your number one that you would want to give the audience as a takeaway?
Don't just exist. Don't just exist. Because that's where everybody kind of goes wrong. I mean, they're like everybody keeps doing this well, when I'm 50 or when I retire or when I do this and you know, you're just existing. And guess what? My husband got cancer in his mid 40s, okay? And it took him out of commission for a year, but only for a year, thankfully, but he, now he doesn't have a colon and we had to find a new way to exist, a new way to live. But guess what? Since then, we've been through 20 countries. We've climbed, I don't know how many mountains, and we've swam in a lot of seas and a lot of oceans. And I honestly can tell you, I look at it, every single disaster that happens in my life, something amazing comes. Okay. And I know I had a horrible childhood, but I met my husband and my God, I rolled has 300 and is 200 stitches. He was like flighted. And then we were like, okay, we're still the Caribbean because we're just living and the answer. And I was okay, wait, we wanted to go to Paris. We wanted to go to Italy. We've got to find a way to make this happen. So and live your dreams. Oh my gosh, live every dream. You know what? I told myself I'm going to be an interpreter someday. Well, when I was volunteering, I actually did interpret French. It wasn't this grand ambassador interpreter thing that I dreamed of, but I still did it. I lived that dream. Someday I'm going to be a journalist. I'm going to be a photojournalist. I was on TV on this tiny cable station for 2 years. They sold the station last year from wherever I was. I was known as the travel girl.
Oh,
So I was a photojournalist. I'm going to be this famous author someday. Well, I may not be famous, but I do write about famous, so that counts. I mean,
wow.
so, every single thing, and I keep telling myself, I want to write a book about this someday, and someday I will. I have so many ideas for books. Everything I tell myself, you know what? Are you living your dreams? Are you living your nightmares? Or are you making it your nightmares? Because you know what? If you think about everything you ever said you ever wanted to do, ever, think about stuff in your life. Have you actually done something that kind of could be seen as that? I mean, people don't realize that. I really realized, especially in my travels, everything I ever thought I really want to do, maybe it's not the same version, it might not, but it's part of it. And that I think I would like to leave people with that. I'd like to leave people with, you know what? Don't let things own you. Live, don't exist.
That's
And
amazing.
realize it. Really think if you're living your dream. I mean,
I
my
love it.
next dream, I have only one more dream left that's really important to me, and that is I want to be a public speaker. I would love to get up on a stage and speak in public. And it doesn't even have to be a bunch of times. It could be one time, but I would love to get up and inspire a bunch of people. Like
You know
I
what?
just
I have something to connect you with. I will send that to you in an email after this. That is awesome. I hope I can help you live that dream as well. But I would love to listen to you speak. I would go sit there and listen to you for hours. So you were a great storyteller, and I can't wait to check out your books. And I absolutely loved having you here. Before we go, why don't you tell everyone where we can find you?
You can find me everywhere, but I do have a website. It's alexisanique.com, Anicque. Most people can't spell it. So I don't know why I didn't do something better about that. I also do have like one of my books on famousadventures.com where you can read the first like 3 chapters, but you can find everything on Barnes and Noble. I'm on Drafted Digital. I'm on BookBub, Goodreads. They can just Google my name and you can find like 50,000. I'm even on TikTok for Pete's sake.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, we need to follow each other. But yeah, so all those links will be located down below. If you're watching all the way to this point, I appreciate you giving us the time of your day. Alexis, thank you so much for joining me. I would love to have you on again. I have another channel that I definitely want to talk to you about, your travels a little bit more. So you're always welcome. Thanks
I,
again for joining me.
Anytime, just shoot me an email, text, Facebook message, TikTok message, Instagram. I don't care. LinkedIn, whatever. I'm on all of them.
Fantastic. Well, to everyone listening, thank you so much again for staying with us all the way through. If you liked what you heard, I have tons more stories, tons more authors, tons more creators on this channel that have already been recorded and posted, and then also more to come. So if you like it, click that subscribe button. If you want to know more about Alexis, I just posted the blog post with her words written on my website at michaelcamriobooks.com. That link will be located down below as well. So, as I said, thank you so much. Read more and write
Thank
mindfully.
you.